This video shows a practice you can use with students after they've done 2 or 3 learning activities and have made some sense out of several new science ideas. The practice asks students to use knowledge to revise a model, an explanation, or in this case, a list of hypotheses they generated earlier in the unit. In this way, it fits with our third set of practices, and specifically is the third in the graphic shown here. The original list of hypotheses was created in a whole class setting using 2 scaffolds. These sentence frames help students understand some of the rules for what counts as a hypothesis. I had one of my novices act as a teacher. The way he moderated the development of the list helped the students learn how to participate in the process. We generated only 2 rather sparse hypotheses, but the point is to later show how they can change in response to new evidence and information.
We've got 2 hypotheses up there that we started the unit with. And now we've just done about 4 or 5 or even 6 class days. And so we've learned a lot. We've done the energy activity. We've read about those different organisms. We know a little bit about abiotic factors. And now we're going to return to this list of hypotheses.
As I introduce this practice to my novices, they are concerned about how to get their own students to participate in such activities.
Is there anything that I should try to do when I manage that whole class discourse? Is there something that's hard for you that you want me to try out?
I've been having trouble getting people to share out. Like usually I found them in a class when I'm on a D2 doing a summary table. It'll be like, I think I'm just asking the wrong questions or something, because it'll usually only be like 1 or 2 students that seem to. Sometimes people jump in, but I'm having trouble making it a class-wide exercise.
Someone gave me the idea of actually having them answer the questions that you're going to ask them first on paper, so that they feel more comfortable answering it, so they have their thoughts more. They think about it more, and they have it written out, and they have it composed, so they can actually share with the class and not feel like they don't know what they're talking about.
So I'm hearing, give them the question ahead of time to think about. I'm hearing to do like a share in small groups first. Maybe the sentence starters up there help. Maybe also it helps if I remind the class that hypotheses are just ideas that scientists have they're not sure about, but they need to be tested. So we're not asking for answers, we're just asking for what might be likely hypotheses. So
if they get the hypothesis and hit the nail on the head, I feel like that's the goal, but it also feels like the finish line.
Sometimes when I have students that like to share, and they're usually correct in their explanation, I ask other students if they agree and why, or if they disagree. But that doesn't always work.
Yes, but this is why you want to make what you are explaining something that's complex and not an answer that you can find in a textbook. So there is no way that anybody could in this class say a correct answer for that, because the response to the question about what's causing the delis to go down is that it's a whole lot of different things and they're all working in concert with one another, but in ways that we're not 100% sure of. So that's why you want to make your anchoring event something that is not a reproduction of something they can look up by Googling it or in the back of the textbook. We are, in a few minutes, going to go back and take a look at these hypotheses that we've got on the board, and we've learned a lot in the last few days. We've done a couple activities around energy. We have looked at graphs of different populations. We've looked at graphs of these abiotic factors like temperature, the air, snow events changing over time. We've looked at data on chinstrap penguins and adeles both. And so we want to use that to see if we can revise our hypotheses. Maybe we want to cross out one of the 2 that we've got. Maybe we want to add. I want to hear from one representative, at least from every group. And some of you may want to fill in this sentence or fill in that one with something that's very similar to what another group has, which is totally fine. What you can do in your group is you can say, you know, I've heard this other group, but we want to offer a friendly amendment. Now, if I was doing this as a teacher, one thing I would not do is take whatever Tina and Parichu say and start writing. Because that would just distract me, and you wouldn't know whether what I was writing was important, you should remember it. So I'm gonna wait and try to hold at least a couple hypotheses in my mind, or maybe I'm gonna write them over here, like a temporary list. So go ahead.
We think that explanation has to do something with the overlapping breeding niches of the chinstrap penguins and the Adelie penguins.
Okay, can you say a little bit more about that?
Because in the readings, it said that the chinstrap penguins pushed the Adelie penguins off their nests because they wanted them for themselves, and then that killed the Adelie baby eggs.
Claim here, is that claim based on data, or is it based on information that you read, or a video?
Information we read,
Which was what?
that the Adelie, the chinstrap penguins pushed the Adelies off their nests
Okay.
to have them for themselves.
Okay. Did anybody have a similar hypothesis? Marie? Who's in your group? You three? You guys want to offer an extension to that, or do you want to say we agree with most of it but disagree with some of it? How do you want to treat their comment?
I think we agree with it. We might add that it has to do with competition for breeding grounds.
Successful breeding increasing when sea ice is decreasing. And so because of that, we thought that it's really the sea ice that's kind of the main cause of that increased competition between the Adelie and the chinstrap for breeding grounds.
Okay, anybody want to add to that, or maybe ask a question of either of these two groups about why they think what they think?
I could be wrong, but I don't remember the sea ice being a factor, but rather that they need land, they're competing for land and breed.
How is sea ice related to their
How is sea ice? Yeah, I don't remember that in the beginning, I remember
So
more
chin
land.
straps they get their food in more open water?
Yeah, so it wasn't necessarily that they,
It was about breeding.
it was like indirect, it was like,
Yeah.
because of the ice, the population of the chinstrap goes up, and therefore
There's
more competition.
Why?
Because
Was it because of
it's
breeding?
something about the feeding, like with open waters, I think it's the chinstrap.
So that's part of my group's idea, if we can add that. That's okay?
Yeah.
So we thought that maybe the graph of the amount of sea ice showed that the amount of sea ice was decreasing over time. So we thought that that would, because in the winter, krill can only live under the sea ice, and Adelie penguins feed on krill. So that means in the winter, there's going to be less sea ice, and so less krill under the ice, which means less food for the Adelie penguins. And so then that would mean fewer of them can survive the winter or breed that year. I mean, in the summer, there'd be less
No,
And winter.
and there's overall just less. Oh, okay. There's still.
I think if I remember right, the chinstrap couldn't hold its breath, is that right? And so the chinstrap feeds like out in open waters, just kind of coming up for air and whatever, just swimming out there. And so like, I think that is the reason for the advantage. So like, I think that's the reason that the chinstrap thrives when the ice is melted.
Should I try to write a short version of these different hypotheses and then see if I can draw lines between them that link?
bullet points.
Bullet points?
Or like causal arrows.
Yeah, bullet, so like, you could like, yeah, exactly, you could like group things kind of and then make connections.
And who had the sea ice hypothesis? They would strongly believe the sea ice played a major role in this. So at least two groups. So it seems like, here's where I, as a teacher, I'm going to say something that you didn't come up with. So it sounds like that is like a root cause, but it doesn't directly cause the Adelie population to go down. So maybe we can talk about abiotic factors in a cluster, and then who's talking about something that results from the lack of sea ice? which groups are starting to talk about that?
Yeah.
Oh, we did, like, because of the seed.
We still have to lay their eggs on land.
So let's write what we do think we know, and then we are going to talk about what it is we don't know yet that we'd like to know before we create any final explanation. So let me try to sketch out what it is we think we know, and let's divide this up into parts of some hypotheses that have a little bit more to do with the abiotic part of the world in the Antarctic environment. Well, first of all, let's look at the ones we have. Should we keep these, or should we make a new list that draws some of these in?
I think a new list, because those are kind of like, because one is a really broad statement and the other one kind of gets into a specific.
We're missing a whole bunch of steps in
Yeah.
between. First step and last step, but we need all the little things in between that all of our groups talked about.
So you think we're missing steps in between? Yep.
In between the effect, which is the Adelie is declining, and cause, the sea ice is shrinking. There's a whole bunch of steps between those two things.
So you're saying this is a cause?
That's the effect, and the cause is the sea ice. Because
Sea ice is shrinking, and then a bunch of steps, and then it ends up that Adelies are declining, and we want
Oh.
steps in the middle.
So you're saying, just this top statement, the sea ice is shrinking as a cause. Sorry, that's not good handwriting. And you're saying this is,
the effect.
so can the people who really focus on the abiotic factors in the environment, can you tell me a couple pieces of your explanation or a hypothesis that you have around the sea ice? And I'm going to draw a little arrow. That means that this affects
The amount of phytoplankton.
okay, amount.
You want to say that it goes down?
Less.
Yeah.
Okay.
Does anybody else want to say anything or make an amendment to this or add something, another part of the hypothesis that has to do with abiotic factors? I'm not calling on the first person with their hand up, right? So I'm giving wait time to everybody, right?
So I can just take this.
Wait, what?
So Molly,
Oh, I was going to talk about the global climate cycle that we talked about in class.
okay, what statement do you want to make?
Uh,
You want to be specific about this. Take a piece
I
of
know,
it.
I remember the diagram in my head too, but all the blanks are like empty.
You just say sea ice decreasing equals more sea ice decreasing.
Yeah. But the ambient air
It's like a
temperature
snowball
went up,
effect, yes.
Ocean
temperature went up.
Yeah, the ocean.
Decreased the amount of sea ice,
I'm trying to say.
which increases the, there's one more in there.
Maybe draw our symbol for it on the
The
board or
heating,
something.
the heating breaks
Was
up
the
the
rain
ice.
on?
Is the sixth.
After you do this, what are you, is this it? Is this all
No.
they're accountable for, or what are they accountable for?
No, I'm only halfway through the unit,
Okay.
right? Only
That's
halfway
what
through
I
the
wanted
unit.
to know.
Yeah.
Are you gonna put this on an explanation?
I can translate this into an explanation checklist,
Yeah.
but for now, it's a hypothesis, a list of hypotheses. Do we have anything that's got to do with krill or leopard sea, anything else? We haven't mentioned, you had krill up there, and now krill doesn't appear here, is that okay? Is that not part of the story? Graham?
So decreasing phytoplankton would result in decreasing krill because krill eat phytoplankton.
So I would figure out as a teacher how to take this and translate it onto a new piece of paper that we can keep up, because I just committed this to chalk on a chalkboard, it's gonna get erased, but I'll figure out how to rearrange these in a way that makes a little bit more sense, and then put it on a piece of paper.
So I and Taylor were talking and I'm like confused about, so you're making a list of possible hypotheses, that's what you're doing. And this will help, so the kids will use it as a tool to write a gapless explanation
In another week,
in another week. But then when are we doing this? Like, is this an explanation checklist?
no, this is a list of hypotheses that we've got.
So when are we doing that in actual classroom?
Middle of the unit,
Middle of the unit?
And when is it gonna come up again? And in what form?
when will these kinds of things come up again?
Or like the same, yeah, because you said you're gonna compile it to maybe
Yeah.
a poster or something.
Yeah, and I'll keep that poster, I'd like to keep that poster somewhere on the side of the room, and it's your class's hypotheses, and you got, as we finish out the unit, you guys are gonna be told by me, or reminded that in the end, everybody will be accountable for linking all of these ideas together and telling me a story that doesn't have any gaps in it.
Okay, so if you have any questions about where there might be holes, or you think there's information missing that you still need, you have this time right now to voice your questions.
Yeah.
And
two
then
could
two
be
is,
decreased due to pressure for competition for breeding grounds from chin straps. And I don't know if those two are in conflict or similar or different, but I'm stuck right there.
I want to put a close on this side. My purpose in doing this is that I'm hoping that you can visualize yourself having a conversation like this, in which you take some original ideas and maybe see how they can be improved and flesh them out a little bit, and not be afraid to do that in a whole class situation.
So those things on that white piece of paper, was
Here?
that our initial ideas?
These were your these were your two hypotheses, if you remember them, that we had the first day.
First day.
Yep.
And then this is what we came back to mid-unit.
Right, well, so what I would keep here is, I would write this again, but I would add this and this in here to note that this is how you're viewing this statement. Now, because that's very valuable, this insight is pretty valuable. And then I'm gonna figure out some way, maybe these need to be reordered or rephrased just a little bit, but I would keep just about everything you gave me. I just put it in an order, or I might put it, as Stu suggested, maybe some of this should go on the left and some should go on the right of a piece of paper. Maybe I turn the paper this way. And our causal explanation would go from the abiotic climate stuff towards more competition between the Adelie and the chin strap and all the biology stuff on the right side.
Unit like this, jumping back to you started with how different this unit is from the tanker car unit.
Yeah.
And I'm starting to puzzle over, a unit like this, to me, it seems like it would have a pretty wide range of acceptable gapless explanations at the end, as long as those.
They can start in all different places.
Yeah.
That's why in a unit like this, it'd be really good to have an explanation checklist that you give kids when they do their final model or explanation, to make sure that no matter where they start, that they include this and this and this and this. Like you need to show in your model, or tell me in your explanation, how energy moves from one place to another in this. Not just include the leopard seals, as a trivial thing, but tell me how energy moves around.
Like half the time kids are just like not into it, like
Yeah,
you're
I was
the
just
complete antithesis of most classes.
do
I'm just
you
wondering,
think
like, how does that,
it's
how do we get them to, I know we can have sentence starters, we can have it, but how do you get them, like, does it help just to have them all? It's not realistic.
You gotta try everything at your disposal.
Yeah.
You gotta try having them talk in groups first. You gotta try having them come up here. You gotta use all these discourse moves to get them to talk to each other. You gotta put them at ease about, these are not right answers, they're just hypotheses. You gotta pull everything out of your toolkit. One good thing that we have in our toolkit is we've done 4 or 5 activities that have given you a lot of information, and you have data. That is really very helpful, because you can make hypotheses. You don't want to drag kids up here without content knowledge.
It is clear to everyone that getting K-12 students to participate in this practice requires that teachers provide some assistance. This includes making sure that students have sense-making opportunities during and after each activity leading up to the revision of the hypothesis list. Students should feel safe in contributing, perhaps using scaffolds that shape their turns at talk. They should at least know the rules of the game. By the end of our lesson together, my students have made significant changes in their thinking. They have added new causal factors, seen how parts of this ecosystem are linked, and are asking more informed questions about what they should learn next.